After 4 long years of spiraling down the abyss of Genshin Impact, Hoyoverse have finally decided to give us a new combat game mode that will hopefully make the God of War herself proud. And once again, just like its counterpart and predecessor, this new game mode finds itself in the land of a thousand winds, Mondstadt. Now, Imaginarium Theater is certainly not what I expected from a new permanent combat event right around the time of Natlan's release, but as usual, when Hoyoverse decides to subvert my expectations, they tend to do it in a good way. And this time, oh boy, it isn't just good, it's good. They are giving us both the appetizers and the soup, because Imaginarium Theater isn't just related to the Hexenzirkel, it also happens to be themed around one of Genshin's oldest and most intriguing books, the Boar Princess. However, is a single book really worth making an entire video about, and on top of that, why should you care about the Boar Princess? Well, yes, to both. You should care because you like the Boar Princess. Even if you don't, you do. You just don't know it yet. Let me tell you why. Back in February 11th of 2023, Hoyoverse put out a splice art piece depicting the traveler in Paimon borrowing a bunch of books and taking them to read with Alhaitham on his birthday. The books they borrowed include A Legend of Sword, Flowers for Princess Fishhole, and Shogun Almighty, reborn as Raiden with unlimited power. But the main book of interest, namely the one Alhaitham is reading, happens to be the Boar Princess. Now, on its own, this wouldn't be that big of a deal, until you realize that this is far from the only instance where the traveler specifically recommends this book to other people. For example, if you read the description of Ayaka's Fontanian skin, there is a line about the traveler asking her to read the Boar Princess. And look, there are several other depictions of the traveler talking about the book or asking someone else to read it. So to avoid beating a dead horse, the point I'm trying to get across is that the Boar Princess is the traveler's favorite book. Naturally, seeing that Imaginarium Theater is themed around it made me raise an eyebrow and go, This is because Imaginarium Theater is clearly made by and heavily involved with the Hexenzirkel, while the Boar Princess is a fairy tale written by one of the witches of the Hexenzirkel, Andersdotter. As a matter of fact, in her old age, Andersdotter specifically left the Boar Princess with the rest of the witches to preserve it and pass it down to the next generations, strongly indicating that this book held a special place in her heart for her to want its message to be seen by others after her death. Yeah, keep her in mind, we will come back to her later. But first, we should briefly go through this book she wrote, since, well, the entirety of this video along with the upcoming permanent game mode revolve around its story. The Boar Princess is a children's fairy tale that consists of 7 or potentially 8 volumes. I say potentially 8 because during the World Quest Unfinished Comedy, Volume 8 of the story will be temporarily present in Elvard's shop inside the Fortress of Meripede. However, neither can the volume be purchased, nor do we know what's inside it, so for now I will just run with the 7 volumes we have access to. The fairy tale opens up by describing a beautiful era in the distant past, where every living being in the world had its own kingdom. Mondstadt was a forest in that age, and in the forest was the Boar Kingdom. The Animo Archon Barbatos blessed the Boar King with the most beautiful and kind-hearted daughter who always shared the juiciest and sweetest fruits with her subjects. North of the Boar Kingdom, there lay a vast frozen tundra, untouched by the playful breeze of Barbatos, and even the brave and strong Boar King could not venture into the icy land. Only a single lonely wolf lived in that place. The pup was a carefree child with bright blue eyes and silk gray fur that hunted in the forest until one day he ran into the evil squirrel sorcerer, Wubaqua. Of all the beings in the ancient world, none were more evil than Wubaqua. Not even the demon gods and the dragons could compare to his evilness. Wubaqua despised everything nice and swore to transform beauty into ugliness and turn light into dark. The sight of the happy wolf enraged the evil sorcerer, and he decided to spike the pup's heart with the coldest ice so that he may never know hope again. Thinking that he was edible, the wolf pup gobbled him up in his mouth, which angered Wubaqua even more, understandably, making him utter the most foul words to ever come out of a squirrel's mouth as he cursed the wolf even more while sliding down his throat. The curse turned the pup into a bitter wolf, and soon all his kin came to detest him. So, with his heart pierced by ice and no choice left, the wolf isolated himself in the blizzards of the north, becoming the only one to wander in the empty frozen tundra. Upon hearing of his tale, the Boar Princess's heart broke for the wolf, and so she asked her two most trusted companions, the wise fox and the old turtle, how to help him. The two told her that only sincerity and fire could melt the ice in his heart, as no friendship can come without sacrifice. The clever princess knew immediately what had to be done and went on a journey to the frozen tundra while bringing her two companions alongside so that they may be the first to bear witness to her friendship with the wolf. On the way, the three ran into an ancient spirit, a Seelie, with great magical power that offered to guide them towards the wolf in exchange for sapping their energy, to which the Boar Princess immediately agreed, heeding no concern about what her two companions had to say on the matter. And so, the spirit turned into an ice stream that carried the group over the mountain and storm right into the wolf pup. The wolf greeted them with a howl, stating that he hadn't had lunch yet, which caused the Boar Princess to shed warm tears of sorrow that began melting a little of the ice on the wolf's heart. The princess told the pup that she would sacrifice everything to satiate his hunger, which the wolf did not believe, until she offered him the flesh of her very two companions, the wise fox and the old turtle. Quickly, the Boar Princess and the wolf pup pinned the wise fox to the ground as they devoured his body, painting the white snow with crimson red. They then went to gather some moss and mushrooms and enjoyed themselves a tasty turtle soup. The flesh of their companions was so delicious that the pup finally felt the delight of sharing food and making friends. His frozen heart melted completely, and he shed tears of joy as he and the princess returned merrily to their home hand in hand. Okay, let us first address the most obvious characteristic of the Boar Princess. The fairy tale is a fable that tackles the sin of gluttony. And I am not just talking about the ending of the story. The theme of gluttony is hinted at ever since the first volume, where it is initially masked by abundance, as shown in this line, which states that the Boar Princess gave the juiciest and sweetest fruits to her subjects every day. From sweet and sour berries to crisp apples to delicious tree mushrooms, the Boar Princess always shared her delicacies first with her friends. At first, this sounds like generosity, the princess sharing and caring with her people, but as the story progresses, this generosity devolves into a gluttonous betrayal of trust. Even further along halfway through the story, when the wolf pup comes across the evil squirrel sorcerer Wubaqua, he eats the latter without a second thought. And Wubaqua, being described as a creature so evil, more evil than the demons and the dragons, is supposed to paint him as something that is spoiled, something that is bad. And the wolf eating this bad thing, while disregarding what ramifications it might have on his health, is the very epitome of gluttony. What the wolf did is no different from what someone does when they eat processed fast foods that are rich in trans fats and unhealthy preservatives such as butylated hydroxyanisole, sodium benzoate, and butylated hydroxytoluene, which, in case you don't know what those mean, in simple English they translate to higher risk of cancer. Especially sodium benzoate, by the way, since it reacts with ascorbic acid, that's vitamin C, in your body to produce benzene, which is a well-known carcinogen. And these things are found in almost all fast foods, as they are used to preserve fats in meat and whatnot. That is showcased in the story. Eating something just because it tastes good, without taking into consideration if it is bad for your own health. Even the book's title can be interpreted as a smart reference to this. It's called The Boar Princess, where boars are essentially just wild pigs. And the term pig is commonly used as an insult to someone who is especially greedy or gluttonous. They're usually called fat pigs or something along those lines. At any rate, there are other smaller instances of the theme of gluttony playing a role in the story, such as the Sealy draining the energy of the princess, the fox, and the turtle to take them to the other side of the mountain, and as you know, food is energy. But look, this is now starting to get into the nitty-gritty, and I don't want to do that. The highlight point of the story is, of course, when the Boar Princess turns her kindness and abundance into depravity, when she decides to feed the wolf's gluttony by sharing with him the flesh of her two most loyal friends, which is clearly portrayed as her reinforcing his sin to become his friend rather than saving him from it. Nevertheless, an allegory for the Sin of Gluttony is far from the only interpretation that can be made for this book. In fact, the only reason I focus on it so much is because at the end of the day, this is the Traveler's favorite book. And in a game where the Traveler keeps calling Paimon emergency food, while Paimon herself is a character that really likes food and flaunts about having two stomachs in one of her voice lines, I pretty much had to include the concept of gluttony. What I am actually interested in are the story's roots in Norse mythology. You see, Norse mythology is a more than significant contributor to the formation of Genshin Impact's cosmology, and Andersdotter's book does not shy away from featuring these themes. The opening volume of the Boar Princess starts by establishing an ancient world where every animal had a kingdom, and the protagonist's kingdom is the abundant boar forest. This is very similar to the opening chapter of one of Mr. Nine's books, The Legend of the Shattered Halberd, which states that in ancient times when the Axis Mundi was unobstructed, there were 9 realms, each a world of its own. Both Andersdotter and Mr. Nine's books talk about an ancient world order closely resembling the Nordic world tree Yggdrasil, which connects the 9 realms. And in the Boar Princess, the frozen tundra would be the equivalent of either Niflheim or Helheim. I am personally leaning more towards Niflheim since it's also an empty frozen realm. Similarly, the Boar Kingdom can be either Midgard, the realm of the humans, or Asgard, the realm of the gods. Now, with this one, you can make a good argument for both, however, I would ultimately say it's Midgard. In this context, the wolf pup, having his heart spiked with ice and living in isolation in the frozen tundra while displaying gluttonous characteristics, has a lot in common with the infamous son of Loki, the wolf Fenrir, who is destined to devour the All-Father Odin at the end of the world in Ragnarok. As for the evil squirrel sorcerer Wubaqua, well, that one is almost certainly Ratatoskr, the squirrel that runs across the world tree Yggdrasil carrying messages between the nameless eagle perched atop the tree and the base serpent Nidhogg residing at the roots. And here is what I find interesting. Although the eagle on top of Yggdrasil has no name, that was preserved in history at least, there happens to be a hawk that stands between the eyes of the nameless eagle. And that hawk is none other than Vidrfolnir. And his position between the eyes of the eagle above Yggdrasil, or Irminsul, serves to cement Vidrfolnir's status as a visionary in Tivat. He is someone that metaphorically exists above Irminsul, and that implies the ability to bypass its influence, to see through its countless lies. And if Vidrfolnir is at the top of Irminsul, then it would logically be consistent for the base serpent Nidhogg to be his brother, Dainsleif, especially when we consider the following. Dane's constellation is Ouroboros, which is an ancient Egyptian symbol depicting either a serpent or a dragon eating its own tail, and Nidhogg in Norse mythology is also either a base serpent or a dragon, depending on the myth. With that being said, I personally still think that Dainsleif is more likely to be the world serpent Jormungandr, who is destined to find Thor in Ragnarok. Also, Jormungandr is very much associated with the symbol of Ouroboros, more so than Nidhogg. But serpents, eagles, dragons, and hawks aside, I still want to comment on Ratatoskar, or I should say Wubakwa in Genshin. What's interesting is that Wubakwa is said to be more evil than the demons and the dragons. Assuming the demons here are the demon gods, that statement should distinguish Wubakwa as neither a god nor a dragon. But what would he be then? It's actually not that complicated, since it's in his title. Wubakwa is a sorcerer, and that should directly translate to either a wizard or a witch in Genshin's parlance. But when it comes to which witch he is, honestly, I'm not sure. It might be Reindotter, it might be someone else. I won't stick to any specific name because I personally don't really know much about what the Boar Princess actually means in Genshin. Like, sure, there is this whole theme of gluttony and eating your friends, and the traveler calls Paimon emergency food, but when it comes to the Boar Princess herself, for the first time ever, I genuinely do not know who this character is supposed to represent. Not because I don't understand it, but rather because there are so many characters in Genshin that would fit the criteria, and I am not sure which one to pick. For example, here are some of the characters that come into mind as candidates for the Boar Princess, with emphasis on the word some. We have Asmodee, the sustainer of heavenly principles, the Abyss sibling, Piero, the traveler, Bronya, that's the Tsaritsa, Istaroth, or even Paimon herself. Alternatively, the Boar Princess could also be another depiction of Princess Fischl from Mr. Nine's book, Flowers for Princess Fischl. Because aside from the fact that the cover of the Boar Princess is a flower, remember when I said earlier that the opening chapter of Andersdotter's fairy tale has a lot in common with that of Mr. Nine's other book, The Legend of the Shattered Halberd? Well, according to Mr. Nine himself, the Celestial Emperor's daughter in The Legend of the Shattered Halberd is also a depiction of Princess Fischl. Yeah, I think you kinda get the idea. Nonetheless, out of the characters I mentioned, there is one that I am leaning toward just a teeny tiny bit more. And that's Bronya. Also, whenever I say Bronya, that means it's Tsaritsa unless specified otherwise, just because we don't know what her demon name in Genshin will be yet. So, semantics out of the way, my argument for Bronya comes from the fact that right at the start of the game's story, as the Traveler and Paimon are approaching Mondstadt, they come across these three NPCs right here: Parsley, Rosemary, and their son, Sage. Now, the names of these three are a direct reference to an Old English ballad called Scarborough Fair, which one of its lyrics read, "Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, then she shall be a true lover of mine." The ballad is essentially a song about two former lovers who ask one another to perform a series of impossible tasks to prove their true love. And this is important because in Genshin, the parents of Sage, Parsley, and Rosemary are originally from Snezhnaya. And back in their youth, when they lived in Snezhnaya, the two would cosplay as the Wolf Pup and the Boar Princess respectively. And the Cryo Archon's aspect should be love. Now, we don't know for certain, but it most likely is love. So, the god of Snezhnaya is the god of love, while Parsley and Rosemary, who live in Mondstadt but hail from Snezhnaya, used to cosplay the Wolf Pup and the Boar Princess while being named after a poem that talks about two lovers asking of each other impossible tasks. Additionally, Parsley and Rosemary talk about thinking in the past about ascending to Celestia, which is what Archons do. Then it kinda makes sense for Bronya to be the Boar Princess. After all, don't forget that in the story, the Boar Princess was willing to do anything to feed the Wolf Pup's hungry belly. And to prove to him her sincerity, she did the impossible. She shared with him the flesh of her two most trusted companions. But there is one huge problem with what I am saying. The Boar Princess did all of what she did for the sake of melting the ice on the Wolf Pup's frozen heart. However, considering that Bronya is the Cryo Archon, it sounds completely counterintuitive to assume that she would want to melt ice. She is the god of ice at the end of the day. It makes more sense for her to make ice and not melt it, right? Kinda. But not really. Because once you just dig a little deeper, you will quickly realize that this is not the case. You see, the description of the Shivada Jade Gemstone, which directly quotes the Cryo Archon, reads as follows: "Sorry to also have you shoulder the grievances of the world. Since you could endure my bitter cold, you must have the desire to burn. Then burn away the old world for me." So Bronya's goal is to initiate Ragnarok, to burn away the old world to dust. And for that, she will need Loki's son, Fenrir, to devour the king of the gods, Odin. Right? Huh. As of the time of the recording of this video, Sidrine has just been officially released in Genshin, and she is quite cool, since she is a Melusine, but do you know who my favorite Melusine is? It's Canotilla. The reason I like Canotilla so much is because if you do her quest about the Book of Revealing, she has a line where she calls the Traveler a monster. A terrible monster that can devour the whole world in a single bite. Okay, hold on, we're not done yet. This video still has a bit more to go. While it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility, considering that the Traveler has been linked to a beast and a calamity multiple times across the story and game, I am not very confident in the Traveler actually being the counterpart to the wolf pup from Andersdotter's fairy tale. I just wanted to have a dramatic moment in the video, that's all. At any rate, I have one final thing that I want to mention about Andersdotter herself. Her name is very likely derived from the Danish author Hans Christian Andersen, who, just like her, was well known for his fairy tales. Andersen is a patronymic, a fatherly ancestral name that means son of Anders. So if Andersen is the son of Anders, then Andersdotter is the female equivalent of that, the daughter of Anders. And she wrote a story about a wolf pup from the Land of Winds who got his heart pierced by ice. Now, in Mondstadt, we have a wolf who is a wind god that can also manipulate the element of cryo. And his name is Andreas, which sounds and reads very, very, very similar to Anders. Do you see it? Huh? Andreas, Anders, Andersdotter? Yeah, I'm not going anywhere with this. I think this is just an internal joke by the developers and I wanted to point it out. I am sure it would make Sino proud. Andreas brings us to the end of this video. Holy shit, that was so bad. As I mentioned earlier, my primary goal in this video was to highlight and elaborate on the general concepts and themes that are interwoven into the Boar Princess. And remember, there are a number of reasonable interpretations that you can apply to this story, especially when it comes to the princess and the wolf. So what I said in this video does not have to be absolute law. Regardless, I still hope you learned a thing or two from it. Anyway, I have a number of exciting projects that I am preparing before Natlan comes out, and I can't wait for you to see them all. So, as always, massive thanks to everyone who supports this channel on Patreon, and thank you for watching this video. For now, I've been my name for now, and I will see you, hopefully in a few days as long as I don't get busy. Take care.